I've seen top-level players where the pressure of the environment just got to them. And when you, for example, so maybe you had the ball and looked for a guy, and the guy was behind the defense.
If they don't explain it, if they don't teach you why sometimes you shouldn't get close, but keep your distance, or why you have to play one touch, why mental speed makes the difference, if they don't explain that, it's hard for a player to improve.
As I say, the important thing in a football team is not to have duplicate stickers. I mean, if you do one thing, let this one do another. The best coaches should be working with the kids. It's better to teach a child because it sticks than a guy who for 15 years has been turning like this and now try to explain to him that he has to go the other way.
Today we have someone very special. We have Carles Rexach, a legend of Football Club Barcelona, 44 years at the club, as a player, coach, assistant to Johan Cruyff during the Dream Team sporting director. But many people also know him because he signed Lionel Messi's contract on a napkin that changed the history of football completely. Charlie, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Before talking about the napkin, we're going to start at the beginning and understand a bit more of your story. And well, before we get into it, let's...
Well, also...
With Jordi Roura?
Well, first, what you said, right? I think today it's a pleasure to have Charlie here with us. I've been lucky enough to share practically my whole life with him since I met him when I was 13 or 14, I think. And well, until today, I've known him for many years. He's marked my sporting life. He's been my boss. He's my friend. And I also think he's surely one of the most influential people there's been at the club, at Football Club Barcelona in this modern era. Sometimes undervalued because sometimes since he's such an approachable man, so close here, that sometimes for people it seems, well, whatever, but I think he's been one of the most influential figures in the history of Football Club Barcelona. Without a doubt, he's done absolutely everything. Great player, coach, as Nico said, assistant, sporting director, he's done absolutely everything. He signed Leo, he's done absolutely everything, right? And in this sense, for me, it's a privilege that we have him here. And also something that people maybe surely don't know or don't say much when everyone talks about this famous Barca DNA, when everyone talks about this style, about all this that we discuss in Best Version 1, about these basic concepts for player improvement. The master, the inventor, the person who helped us understand all this is here. We have him here. And therefore, for us, for Best Version 1, it's a pleasure to have him here. And we're going to enjoy you very much, Charlie, and we'll talk and discuss everything.
Let's see if that's true.
It's a pleasure. It's a complete honor. We'll talk in this episode about a lot of topics, as you say, the Barca DNA as well. But now, let's start at the beginning. You joined Barca when you were 12. How was that?
Well, back then, all this information didn't exist. Where if there's a good player somewhere, people go out and make a video, send it to you, and suddenly 10 agents are looking for that player. Before that time, scouts would run from field to field. They'd go on Sundays. They'd walk onto a field, look around and say, there's no one here I like. And one day I was playing in the street, a field that was one of those open ones. I mean, it wasn't even fenced in. I was playing there in the street at 12 years old, and a man comes up after the game and says to me, hey kid, where's your father? I say, look, my father is that one over there. And he goes to see my father and says, are you the boy's father? Yes. Would your son like to play for Barca? And my father tells him, go talk to him. And he'll tell you yes or no. Of course, he comes up to me and I say, well, sure, but I thought he was messing with me, that he was joking. Well, then next Saturday, come there at 12 to the Barca field, and that's where I started. I started playing there. But right away, no trial or anything.
Oh, no, there were no trials. There was nothing.
No, nothing. Just straight in. And I started playing boom, 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 and it was a different way of looking for players. Scouts would go from field to field to see what they could find. It was different, you know. But anyway, look, I spent 3 years in the youth team, 3 in the juniors, and then I debuted for the Barca first team because back then you couldn't play before 18. I debuted for the first team in the Cup. I was lucky enough that within 5 minutes I had already scored a goal. Everything went my way, and I just stayed there.
44 years.
That's crazy. And tell us about that moment when you debuted at 18. How was that?
Well, it comes to me, and I had broken my collarbone when I was little. Well, when I was out for 6 weeks, and suddenly I was playing for Barca, but the Catalan national team comes along, the Catalan team that played against Madrid, against the Basques and all that, youth level. And, they call me up, I start playing. At first I was a bit scared because of that, but anyway, I start playing and playing. I start playing well, and in the end we became champions of Spain. I finished as champion of Spain, and they call me for the Spanish youth national team to play in Germany. I go to Germany, I play in Germany, I come back, and as soon as I get here to Barcelona, they tell me, hey, show up on Sunday because you're playing with the first team. But it was also a moment where in life you have to have luck. And it was a time when the Barca first team wasn't doing very well. You know what I mean? And, it's always the same. The youth come out when the ones in front aren't performing.
Exactly.
And so from then on, I was in, like I said, everything went my way because in life you also need a bit of luck, and I just stayed there.
Wow, incredible. And, you spent 16 years playing for Barca.
630
matches.
From the 64-65 season until 80-81. And I'll tell you something, there are many matches, but before, at the beginning of my sports career, there were no substitutions. You either played or you didn't. Now someone says, I've played 1,000 matches. Yeah, but you've played 1,000 half games, You get me? No subs.
Oh, I didn't know that. There were no substitutions back then.
In the early days, there wasn't even a substitution for the goalkeeper. If the goalkeeper got injured, one of the team members would go in as the goalie, and they played with 10. Later they improved, and there was a goalie. If the goalie got hurt, another goalie came on. But there wasn't a single sub. Then came the era of 2 substitutions, you understand? Then 3 with the foreigners, and now, there are 5. I think that for the coach, it's also an advantage, right? Because before, when you traveled and the 2 or 3 who didn't play, they were all angry. On the other hand, now, if you don't play the first half, you'll play the second. And practically every match, they change 50% of the team. Because if they change 5 players, it's half the team. You understand? It's changed. I think for this, it's been better. Besides, there are many matches and people can rotate a little bit more.
And in these 16 years, why did you never leave the club? You always stayed at Barca. And why?
First, I didn't leave because I was doing very well. But also, there was a time in my sports life, when there was a little mess I had with the club and the people, with Masia, another one who played very well, and there was a small problem. But then he left, and they didn't let me go. They didn't let me go, but people say, if you want to leave, you go. No, in that era of mine, there was a right of retention. You signed for 3 years or for 1 year, and automatically you were always retained with 10% more than what you were earning.
So, excuse me, there wasn't, let's say, the release clause that exists today, right?
There wasn't before. And then came the Bosman Law. Do you remember? Older people will know it, younger ones will, which was when they put a clause that, I want to leave. What do I have to pay? This much money and I'm gone. That didn't exist. And then, of course, they could keep you retained your whole life. And you were a bit like you were a slave for that time. And it can't be. And there was a lot of trouble. It lasted a long time, but in the end, it was achieved. And now, the player, when he signs, says, but if I want to leave by paying this much, I'm gone. And it's the way to be able to escape from this. But before, it didn't exist.
And now, in 1971, you won a Pichichi, the top scorer in the league. Was this your best footballing moment, do you think, or is there a better moment?
No, you know what happens? That the problem with I had always played as a centre forward, as an inside forward, which was where I scored the goals, because you see the goal head on, and it's much easier, plus I shot well. But of course, the typical football thing, they signed Cruyff, they signed Sotil, one left inside forward, another centre forward, Masia. The only ones who had, let's say, the ability to practically play as a winger were either Cruyff, who was a guy who handled himself well on the wing, or me on the other side. You know what I mean? And so what happens? Well, I always had to adapt a little bit more to, and although I've always scored goals, but of course, from the wing, it was a little bit harder to score, right?
Of course.
But I'm telling you that in the early days, I played more centrally. And of course, I always had the goal much more in front of me.
Sure. No, but that's actually a very good point, that being the league's top scorer is really something to talk about.
Yes, like I said. No, listen, like I said, I've always scored goals. I mean, more or less, like I said. But of course, there comes a time, for example, I'm telling you that here, look, playing as a forward in Barcelona has always been very difficult of the three up front because, for example, when there weren't any here, there was, for example, Heredia, who was Argentine, Cruyff and Sotil, and I always played. But then, look, for example, at other eras, you'll see that the three up front have been Messi, Ronaldinho, and Eto'o. Yes. Afterwards, they've been always the three up front. They've always been foreigners, or Messi, Neymar, and Suarez. You know what I mean? Yes. Or all of them, always the three up front, have always been the stars. And of course, to spend as many years as I did up front, always competing with the best players and playing practically all the time. It's complicated.
Besides, I mean, for example, Charlie, I was little, I was a kid, and I used to go see him I would go to see a match at the stadium, and he was playing. And so, Charlie, right, you're a person that people loved very much. Or they'd whistle at you sometimes, right, Charlie? Sometimes, and in the end, they'd give him an incredible whistling until he scored a goal. But I mean, he was an extraordinary player who never went unnoticed, I remember it from when I was little, that atmosphere at the stadium, well.
Besides, I took the free kicks, I took the penalties, and there were very high-level people here, but I always took the free kicks and the penalties because I was a good kicker, as I told you before. Oh, look at that. But what I'm trying to say is that, in a way, I was a rather cold technical player. And so, for example, if one day I started and maybe, because back then, that thing about making a back pass, people would give you a hard time. Yeah. When people saw you as a forward, you had to go for the one-on-one and head for the goal. My goodness. And of course, sometimes you'd start a match and they'd take it from you once, they'd take it twice, the next one you'd miss, and you'd already hear the whistling starting. And after a while, well, the big uproar. But I was a guy who was very calm, and I thought, well, the next one. And I have anecdotes. I remember one day here against Madrid at home on December 28th, which is Holy Innocents' Day. We were playing the match, boom, boom, and we were playing sensationally, but sensationally, Barca, everyone. And me too. And we were winning 1-0. Well, until the second half came, listen, we all kept playing excitedly, boom, and suddenly a Madrid player comes, Piri, a Madrid player, scores the equalizer on a corner, a header, goal, and there was half an hour left. I said, I'm going to see if I can push myself here and score a goal. And I started, boom, boom, hogging the ball a bit more than I should instead of passing it. The first shot, boom, grazing the post. The crowd, oh, yeah. The second one, boom, into the second tier of the stands. The third one, I gave it a real wallop, and I sent it right over the Tibidabo mountain, And of course, the people were whistling, and suddenly there was a minute or half a minute left, something like that. And there's a play, boom, corner kick. And I used to take the corners because I was also... And I say, I'm not going to the sideline because they'll boo me so hard, I'll be paralyzed. So I stayed outside the box. Someone takes the corner, someone clears it with a header, and since I was outside the box, just like that with my left, I hit it on the volley, and if I shoot 100 times, 101 will go wide. Bam, goal. Look, people jump onto the field, they carry me on their shoulders, and from that day, I said, this is fixed when things go wrong. Is it fixed by scoring a goal? Something like that, right? Look, in football, what you can't do is be afraid. If you fail, you fail, but you have to keep going and going and going because then you make a great play and it's all over.
In the end, remember, we've talked many times when we discuss how important it is how you react to a mistake or how you react to the mindset. So this has always been there. This is the clear example. In the end, you try. It doesn't work. They boo you. They wave white handkerchiefs. But in the end, persistence pays off. And you nail it. Therefore, the mental aspect is increasingly essential in football.
And then, totally. There's one thing that in a big team like Barcelona or Madrid, a great team, what happens? There comes a time when people come here at a very high level. I've seen very high-level players whom the pressure, the environment has overwhelmed. And when you, for example, saw maybe you had the ball and you looked for a guy and the guy was behind the defender. He didn't even want to receive it because he knows that things are getting complicated, and this can't be. I mean, you have to be a bit bold, a bit confident, mentally. Otherwise, you can't play in a big team like Barca.
This is the importance when we talk about these kids, right? That we discuss in Best versus One, the importance of the mental aspect. It's what Charlie says in the end. You have to prepare yourself if you want to play for a big team to take on this pressure. And these kids are used to it, they're well trained, and they manage to reach the level. In the end, because of this, there's no other way. And more, in the elite, you have to be mentally strong.
Totally. And tell us a bit about playing with Johan Cruyff. What was it like playing with him? Well, Johan Cruyff, we were talking a bit about how when he came, besides the fact that football-wise he was an extraordinary player, Cruyff was a guy who already came here with football concepts a bit different from what was seen at that time. Back then, everything was you have to fight, you have to struggle, you have to run more than the opponent, you have to suffer, you have to die on the field, those cliches from the coaches. But no one ever told you, but you have to play well. That didn't exist. If you want to, you can whatever. I thought, those are words that sound very good to people, right? So Cruyff came here, he having played with Ajax, and they had won 3 European Cups, and they already came, let's say, we could say that tactically and technically from another level, right? Here, for example, we still played a lot. You go out on the field and do 10 laps, then you go up the stands, bam, 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 all the way to the top. Then it was all strength, everything, and of course, everything just hurt. Then he came here, and he already, since Rinus Michels came quickly, who was Dutch and had coached him, we already started to transfer everything to the ball. I mean, we ran just as much, but you'd make a pass, another pass, run out to the wing, put in a cross, do a sprint, but you had to get there, get the ball, and cross it well. Because you run a lot and you get there, and then when you go to cross it, you kick it out. It's useless, right? And so we started to change the training concept a bit, doing everything with the ball. I mean, always having the tool of the trade at your feet, that thing where, and from then on, things started improving. And then later, when I became that type of player as well, when Cruyff and I took over the team and started implementing that whole system, we also applied it to the youth academy, especially the type of training. The way of playing, footballing concepts, not that idea that by playing more people, by having more people back, you defend better, let's say having them more staggered. I mean, a series of things. And from there, well, this is what has lasted over time.
It's what we were talking about before. It's just fantastic. In the end, when Charlie explains this to us, this is the origin. The origin of that famous idea everyone talks about, the Barca DNA, whatever, this whole theory we explain about understanding football, about mental speed. They started with Charlie and Johan to propose this series of situations, ideas, positioning, all these concepts that we try to make people understand in Best version 1. They were born here. This is the true origin of understanding football, which I was then lucky enough to have from him. We'll talk later.
And then when I started picking players who had actually played with me before, Asensi, Amor, Artola, all those who had played for the first team, top-level players, and we put everyone from Barca B, the youth team, to the kids team. And then what happens? They all played the same way. The concept of football was the same. But we played the same, and when we took a guy from the B team to play for the A team, the youth player jumped here, the other jumped here, and the other jumped there. When the first team player, who was from the B team, went back down, everyone went back down. And that was also very important because the player at the bottom saw that he had a chance to move up to the top. And it's a bit of a chain. And on Saturday, I'd say to you, to Costas, who was also in the B team, hey, on Sunday I'll take this one, or we'll take this one. He takes the youth team, and the youth team, and I took the junior team. And this
is the line of succession, as they call it, right? But before Charlie takes the first team with Johan, he coaches. I mean, for example, he brings me into Barcelona.
I signed him too.
He started coaching the Catalan junior team, and I was in my hometown. Nobody knew me. He signs me. I mean, wow. He brings me in, and from there, let's say, champions or runners-up in Spain, then he signs me. He starts coaching at Barcelona and signs me as a Barcelona player. That's great.
And what did you see in Jordi? He played as a center forward. He was a very fast guy, very skillful. And besides, he played in a small town. And also, I went to see them. I'd go watch them. I'd set it up, for example, so you understand. I just go to Girona and I tell one of the coaches, hey, put together a selection from here in Girona. And I go to see it. And I say, hey, number 7 and number 6, have them come next week.
To train here.
And I'd sign them like this guy. And look, this guy later, because people don't know it, but he got a serious injury and had to retire from football in a European Super Cup match against Milan.
Yes.
In 87, he wasn't just any player. He had damn real talent. It's just that he had the bad luck of breaking his
leg, his knee,
and all that.
But what's incredible here is when we arrived, when he signs me for Barcelona, I'm in the youth team, and then he moves on to coach the juniors. But the thing is, before him, youth football, it's like he said, we used to train in a certain way, lots of running, lots of that stuff. Not that you shouldn't, but he came in and we trained differently. We started training all these concepts like 3 versus 1. We train what he always told us about body positioning, passing lines, being a meter further forward, right, Charlie? Distance, the whole thing about distances, all the work in tight spaces, the positional games, improving mental speed, all these concepts were born there. And while all developmental football went one way, we went the other. I mean, that's where the real revolution began. That's why I was saying before, I admit I'm not impartial, but we were talking about the importance earlier. This is one of the great legacies they've left, this knowledge, having things explained to you. If they don't explain it, if they don't teach you why sometimes you shouldn't get closer but keep your distance, or why you have to play one touch, why mental speed makes the difference if they don't explain that, it's hard for a player to improve. And here, I'm the clear example. Everything I might know or not, it's because they passed it on to me. And then, when they reached the first team, they put it into practice at the highest level with the successes that everyone knows about.
No, and it's clear it worked because they've come through. La Masia is world-renowned.
Work still works.
Yes, but you, for example, how should I put it? You say there are guys like Messi or Maradona or Cruyff where you don't say anything and he just positions himself well and shoots well and does it at the exact right moment. And you ask him, how do you do this? And even he doesn't know. I mean, he's a guy who was born with a gift. But then there's another who, by explaining 4 things to him, if he's technically halfway decent, well, the guy can do a lot. It's about understanding the game.
That intelligence.
For example, you tell a guy, you position yourself, you go to a normal match and see a player alone, you stand in midfield and see that the guy maybe asks for the ball or calls for it or whatever, and you tell him, they pass him the ball, and you stop the play. And when he receives it, you say, let's see, you've received it, where are you looking? To your keeper.
Well, body profile.
Right. So when the other guy has the ball or it's coming to you, you need to have as many passing lanes inside as possible. So if you come here and give it to me, the only thing I can do is give it back to you because I don't have any more vision.
Sure.
If I drop back further, I'd see you, this guy, or someone else.
The distance. No, the thing about distance is, Charlie.
And so all those things can be improved in a player.
Right, yeah.
But these are players who are technically good, but they're not great. You know what I mean? And so there are many players where you say, damn, well, that guy isn't anything out of this world either. But within a team, it works.
Of course.
So sometimes it's trained, but people come to copy. There are many people who come to see Barca and see how they train and all that. But the purpose of the game that they're watching, they don't understand it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If they see them do that, I'll do the same. No, but whether you're here or you're there, there's a big difference.
It's just that they have to...
1 meter, right?
They have to explain it to you. In the end, they're concepts that they have to teach you. And it's what Charlie says. 1 meter closer or 1 meter further away allows you to have a vision, for example, of the field, which gives you many more passing options. And all this, Charlie, basically with small-sided games, positional play, which we'll talk about later. But it's a world that allows you to improve a lot, without a doubt. Without a doubt.
Totally, yeah. And well, we're going to go into much more detail on these concepts, but I also want to go back to a part of when you were a player in 1979, when you won the European Cup Winners' Cup against Fortuna Düsseldorf.
Yes.
4-3, and you scored a goal.
Yes, exactly. Well, about that match. Well, that match, which happened 10 years earlier on the very same field, we actually played the Cup Winners' Cup final as well, and it was against Slovan Bratislava. Unfortunately, we lost that game. The score was 2-3. It was a tough loss, really memorable, and it still stands out in my mind even now. And after 10 years, you say, damn, and Slovan Bratislava, a team that for us, with all due respect, was no match. Barca had to win because they were far superior, but we lost.
Right.
So that means that later, after 10 years, You can play another final in the same place and win it. And against the Germans, who are more dangerous, it already has a charm.
No. And how was that moment of winning that and scoring a goal?
Well, you know what happens? That the match was a moment, let's say, they did some publicity, and it's perhaps the time that the Barcelona member or supporter traveled the most to see this final. And of course, there were 4 planes, but few planes, and they all left, but maybe 50 coaches. I don't know how many, right? And it was something that when we went out onto the field and we saw, it felt like we were playing at home. The whole field full, a field that was a bad little field with the grass, a hand's breadth of grass. But anyway, we said, look, if we lose here today, we can't go back home. If we lose today, we stay here and we don't go back because of that pressure. You know what I mean?
The pressure, yeah.
Mental aspects again. And we're always on the same thing.
Very important.
But that final, I think, Charlie, was a milestone for the club. I mean, it was because of the movement, because of what it meant. Barca hadn't won a European title. It was a before and after the Basel final.
For us, if you see what I mean, the problem, there was a time at Barca with the famous refereeing issues that have come out worldwide. For many years, for example, in a good league season, I personally lost 3 leagues in the final minute. I mean, by final minute, I mean, you know, like the one Messi lost here at home, where there's a corner and they score, but it's disallowed for offside, and then it turns out it wasn't offside.
Atletico Madrid?
Well, exactly. It happened to us in Cordoba. It happened against Atletico Madrid, where we scored and were winning 1-0, and at that moment, we were champions. And in the end, a foul or something like that. And in that one, against Cordoba, we were also there. A draw was enough. Cordoba was relegated with 5 minutes left. A penalty, he missed the penalty, 1-1, and Atletico Madrid won the league. I have many experiences of that kind, you know? So what happens? It was very hard for Barca to get into the European Cup, because back then only the league champion entered the European Cup. I mean, it was the League of Champions. The champion of Spain, champion of Italy, champion of England, and since we finished second, we played in the UEFA Cup. And the UEFA Cup was extremely difficult to win because you could say all the failed teams of the season, imagine, here in Spain, Madrid wins. They go to the Champions League, but then Barcelona, Atletico Madrid, and for example, Villarreal go to the UEFA Cup. In Italy, Juventus to the European Cup, but Inter and whoever else, all of those to the UEFA Cup. Of course, so you'd arrive and play against all the top teams that hadn't won their league. And it was incredibly hard. And we won 4 UEFA Cups, but it didn't have the same significance as the other one.
Sure.
You understand?
Yes.
So that, I mean, Barca has won many European Cups, Cup Winners' Cups, yes, but the European Cup wasn't being won at that time. Because also you'd play the UEFA Cup, and your first game was Liverpool, the second Manchester, the third.
They were straight knockout rounds, of course.
It was complicated, but I'm telling you, if you didn't win, it was easier, I'm telling you, right? Because winning the European Cup, because in the European Cup you had the champion of Spain, okay? The champion of Italy, okay? The champion of England and another. There were 4 good teams, but the champion of Switzerland, the champion of Denmark, the champion of Bulgaria, or the champion of wherever were just average.
Right.
On the other hand, we played against the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th best from every country. It was complicated.
No.
So it was difficult.
Well, this stage of being a player was very nice.
Yes.
And then, you actually became a coach for others.
Yeah.
Almost immediately after he retired as a player, right after his playing career ended.
Yes. So, well, it was 81, and we were already old. I mean, the team was overhauled. There were many, many changes. And then, of course, as I say, I'd wake up in the morning. I'd get up and say, where are you going? Well, it's over now. This is finished.
And when did you know you were going to or wanted to be a coach?
No, even before finishing. Let me explain.
Oh, you knew.
I said because I always played. So, of course, one game I wouldn't play. The next I would. And I kept playing until the end, right? But it was time, The time was coming when I liked playing, because what I liked was playing myself, you understand? And then I said, well, the time comes when, and I had an offer to go to Atletico Madrid for 2 more years. And honestly, they nearly made me start to doubt myself, And then I said, well, okay, the moment that, and I had an offer to go to Atletico Madrid for 2 more years, and they almost made me doubt, But I said, no, I've already said I'm retiring, and I'm retiring at Barcelona.
That's nice.
And then, of course, I played my whole life at Barcelona from age 12 until 35. But, of course, then you say, well, now what? Now what, right? You're finished? And what do you do? So I joined the youth team, which I liked because I always played. I trained like them. I was strong. I played football. Plus, you could demonstrate things. For example, I'd get there and say something like, I bet I can score more free kicks than you can. And of course, I was feeling strong at the time since I'd just finished playing. So I was really confident. So I could compete with that, It really had its own unique charm. Well, so I took the youth team. In 3 years, we were Spanish champions twice. We won the league and the cup. And then when Luis Aragonés came, who was from Madrid, he said, well, I'm coming to coach Barcelona, but on one condition, that Rexach comes as my assistant, because Luis Aragonés and I had both played in the league with the Spanish national team. I played right wing. And he played inside, and then he told me, hey, if Charlie comes here, and so on. And then I started with him. But it was a very difficult time, the whole mutiny. I don't know if the news reached your country, but the Hesperia mutiny at Barcelona changed to a very convulsive situation. 18 players, and then Luis Aragonés left, and then Cruyff came, and from Cruyff on, everything, I'm here, I have power over the team, things work. And from here, the whole concept of training changes a bit.
And that vision, when Johan Cruyff started and you were the assistant, did you already have that vision when you began?
Yes, because also, when he first arrived here, he practically only knew me, honestly. And I showed him all of Barcelona, and I brought him here with his whole family. We had played 5 years together at Barca, in the Barca forward line, and we were very close friends. And now still colleagues, let's go coach. And so we complemented each other very well, because the concept of football was the same. Because if you say, this one doesn't quite convince me, man, I prefer this one over the other. Few differences. And from here, let's say we started looking, well, there were at least 14 or 15 departures. We practically made a new team. And from then on, we had some issues in that first year, but we won the King's Cup. And then the following year, we went on to win 4 league titles in a row. And after that, we lost the final of the
Cup Winners' Cup.
We won the European Cup.
And
those were some really great years. And
in 91, when Cruyff had his heart surgery and you took over the team, what was that like?
well, of course, things were always happening at Barcelona. One day when I was still playing, we were in first place in the league, another league season.
And
It turns out they kidnapped our center forward. They kidnapped him, or they had
a kidnapping
kidnapping.
of Queenie.
With only 2 or 3 games left to finish the league,
And
the people, we were in first, and people weren't even worried about the football match anymore. People were like,
Queenie,
where could he be? He was gone over a month,
a month?
held captive, kidnapped, and they couldn't find him, wondering if he'd been killed. And for everyone, the problem wasn't football anymore. It was where Queenie was.
Of course. And
So, well, the whole thing was, it was different. So, whenever something happens here, they forgive it. Then, when it happens, Cruyff, we're ahead by 2 or 3 points. Cruyff has a heart attack. So then, and I, knowing the Catalans and all that very well, I say, stay calm. Always trying to provide some reassurance. This team plays by heart. You already know what you have to do, this and that. And people, well, we go to play at Bilbao Stadium against Athletic Bilbao, whose coach was Clemente, who had been the Spanish national coach. And well, we get there, and man, it's a difficult, complicated match. And the match begins. 0-6 in our favor. A spectacle, just a total spectacle. 4 goals from Stoichkov, 1 from Baquero, the other from Julio Salinas. Anyway, we get back here, and I was saying, it's nothing, man. I told you the team would run itself. I could just go home. The team is working fine. And then it was just boom, boom, boom. And we started crushing it. And if we were 3 points ahead, we finished with a 3-point lead. But the team was already on autopilot. Just a few tweaks here and there. And as I say, keeping the locker room happy and everyone pulling in the same direction. And so we won that league, the league we won by the biggest margin, you know? And, well, that was that. Johan recovered, and, well, everything was perfect.
the dream team, right?
Dream team
Exactly. You won 4 consecutive leagues,
in
92 a European Cup.
a European Cup. We won a Cup Winners' Cup.
And we lost another one, and we lost another one.
And
What was the secret of that dream team?
Well, the dream team is that first we were able to sign people, which is what we wanted. As I say, the important thing for a football team is, as we say, not to have duplicate stickers. If you do one thing, let this guy do another.
Everyone had their role.
To give you an idea, I'm very good with my head, and I strike the ball very well. So you don't take the corner, and I'll go for the header, because what you have to do is play each in their place, and each one, what can you do? This will go all out with this. I don't want to make things up, right? And then for us, what are we missing? It's a guy here so he can do this. And I go look for him, you know? Sometimes very good players are signed, but they're redundant in position. Either one plays or the other plays. It's like if you say, the two best goalkeepers in the world, yes, but both can't play. One plays, you see? So that's a little bit of what we achieved at that time, because we could make practically a new squad.
And football-wise, it was a revolution. Football-wise, because of the system, the 3-4-3, the idea of football, the speed we played with, it was a revolution. But
for example, up front you had Laudrup, one of the foreigners, not to mention the others, Laudrup, Stoichkov, and what's his name? And Romario, for example. Or
Goicoechea played.
Yes, well, but I mean foreigners. Romario, Laudrup, and Stoichkov, each one was totally different. One was fast as a bullet, the other was a guy who was incredible one-on-one, and the other did something else. I know how they complemented each other, you know? I mean, it's not like we have two doing the same thing, and I think that's where the success was.
Well, and Charlie, and correct me, but I think that here, the idea or the figure of the false nine started to be invented a bit. Sometimes when Laudrup played, right?
Yes, because at first Cruyff played as a nine, but also as a false nine. Cruyff never played there. About to be a guy who went to the right, to the left, he worked, and then we had to find a way, and instead Stoichkov in his team played as a center forward, fast, always looking for the... But of course, since we as Barca attack a lot, press the opposing team a lot, To give you an idea, where Stoichkov started in his team, which was midfield, now at Barca, Koeman played here, and Stoichkov played almost in the box.
He had no space.
Then, when it was a long ball, the field was over. So what did we have to do? Again, Laudrup as a nine, he'd come back to get it, and when there was that space there, Stoichkov would come in diagonally, the pass would go there, and he'd score. You know? Sure. Then we were perfecting the system, you see?
And evolving more and more. We saw it with Messi too, and we're going to keep seeing it. And I also want to know, we're going to dive deeper into the Barca DNA now. I want to understand more. And
forgive me for a second, and that thing with Messi as a playmaker in the 6-2, I heard a comment and I said, why doesn't Messi play as a playmaker? Well, because he's a guy who will make life difficult for everyone. And Messi, while he has always been the absolute very best, once he moved to the middle with the goal right there in front of him, Messi has truly been spectacular.
Yes.
Yes, that's kind of the point. I mean, in the end, a player can be very good, but if you also find the exact spot for him, the thing is, of course, if Messi plays, someone else can't, and whoever comes in either adapts or doesn't play.
Of course.
But it's the law of life. I mean, the whole world recognizes that Messi has been the best.
No doubt, absolutely no doubt. So let's understand a bit what this Barca DNA is that you and Johan created, in a way.
Well, Barca DNA is basically, first dominating the, what's it called? The work environment, which is the ball. You, for example, nowadays, you come to, I don't know, something silly, right? A player there and another player here, passing the ball. You pass it, he stops it. He boom passes it here, he stops it. Sure, it's easy. But you say, no, it's not like that anymore. It's when the ball arrives, you already stop it, but towards there. With one touch, it's control and it goes well that way. No. You come, I stop it, and I touch it again. Instead of two touches, one. And you already give it speed. Speed.
Mental state.
Mental speed, because look, there's a theory to explain that. We had like 10 commandments, right? So you understand. But we said, look, everything is speed. Nowadays, you use a computer and you want to click and have it respond quickly. If you have to wait 5 seconds, that computer is slow. Everything is speed. Everything is speed. So I had a coach who told me there are 3 types of speed. 3. The one a person runs, being a fast guy, fast. The other is mental speed. The ball comes and you go bam on the first touch and it's there. And the other is ball speed. There's the typical guy who gives a pass that's so slow you have to blow on it. No, a pass should go bam and be there. A cross goes bam and arrives. Not boom, where the guy runs across the field faster than the ball, you know? And then he'd tell me, if you run and you're slow, don't bother training, you'll always be slow. I mean, don't waste time doing sprints because you'll always be slow. That kind of player is either fast or slow from birth. And so all you can improve is the speed of the ball and the speed up here. And that's what we work on. So the ball comes, boom, you're already positioned. Not like, and you go to a team and say, look, they're playing long balls now, and you see a guy go like this, and paf, he stops it perfectly. And then he sets it up, and then he takes the shot. That's perfect. But this has to be faster, because as soon as you go bam, and to show him, because everything has a reasoning behind it, as we all know, but then it has to be proven. I'd set up a small rondo and say, now we're going to pass. And someone who wants to take it from you, he'd put one there, and you'd go bam, 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 bam. He wouldn't touch it. He'd say, now, it's mandatory to take 2 touches. Sure, by the time you had to stop, the guy trying to take it was already there. I mean, so he could show you that speed is absolutely crucial. Do you know what I mean? Because obviously, in a tight space, you say, everyone plays with 2 touches. It's bam, pass, but that's slow. Now, if I go bam, 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 that guy never touches it. So you always have to find an explanation using something that helps demonstrate what you're trying to say. And that's a bit of how you explain the topic, right? Explaining the topic and saying, and why is this? No, not just because of logic. And you have to look for examples.
That's why we never get tired of repeating it and talking about it. That's why it's so important when we at Best vs. One talk about mental speed. It's this. It's being able to think fast, to give the game agility, and that's what really gives you that top level and makes you improve to the highest level. Otherwise, you can't play.
If you control the ball and have to think, you're late.
Exactly. And that's a huge margin for improvement. Every player can improve so much with this.
Yeah, man, well, it is, but I'm saying everything has a way that you understand. You say, okay, here comes this ball, and I stop it and play it well. Or I stop it, if there's time I stop it, and you do whatever you want and take 3 touches. But if you say there's little space, when there's little space, the less space there is, the faster you have to go. You know? Because if someone gets an inch on you, that's it. That's why always later, well, if we talk about technical things, we'll talk about other stuff. But it's all the same. It all comes down to the same thing. That's it.
Yeah. For example, when I was in the United States and I moved, in the United States, I was very good technically because it wasn't as fast as here in Spain. So when I moved here to Spain, everything was much faster and I would always control and think before. And of course, they'd steal it from me because everything was faster and I had to think when I received the ball. So it's true that when I learned this and I had to adapt to the game in Spain.
Yeah.
Everything goes, you learn to play. The hard part is making it simple.
Of course, which is exactly what's difficult.
So
it means that you, for example, say, well, when you receive the ball, generally, you have to look for who to pass it to. I mean, I have it and I go, let's see, who do I pass it to? They've taken it from you 3 times or 4. So that's the first thing. So one of the drills is you keep playing your game, but all the time you're checking so that when the ball reaches you, you say, I've already seen that guy over there, bam, and we're always back to the same thing. When you have the ball, you have to try to see as many of your players in position as possible.
Yeah.
And of course, if you are facing away from the opponent's goal, for example, you only see the center back and those 2 over there, I mean.
Yeah,
Means problem is the same.
Yeah.
And these are examples where you say, hey, that's very easy. I already know that. Or it's logical, yes, but it's not practiced on the field. And yet when you train, you say, you're out of position. If instead of being here where you asked for the ball, you had asked for it over there,
yeah,
right? You would see that one, and the left winger. You get me?
Of course.
Then, if you execute quickly and have enough technique to play it there, we've already gained 2 seconds. In 2 seconds, no one has been able to get into position.
Right?
Now, if, as I say, you go very slow, very slow, very slow, that's the problem.
Hey, quick reminder, if you want to keep improving as a footballer, click the link in the description for more information on Best Version 1, our football development platform and community.
That's why, again, when we've talked so many times about the importance of being well-positioned, of body orientation, of how you position yourself, because it allows you to do what Charlie says. Either see nothing or see the whole field, which means the range of options for playing are multiple. Therefore, this concept we also talk about from time to time regarding body orientation and positioning is essential, and it makes the difference, right, Charlie? It makes the difference.
Of course.
But look, it's become very fashionable in football now with this change in playing out from the back, that the goalkeeper, who's the one starting, plays it to the man, to the pivot, so to speak, to the pivot. Sure. You and many others close in, and the goalkeeper passes it to the pivot. Imagine that there have been many teams that have conceded many goals like that, right? They've lost the ball. And I move closer. If the two full-backs are, even if they're just on the same line as the one I'm looking for, he doesn't see anyone anymore. He only sees the goalkeeper.
Yes.
Just by having them there and him being a little further away, he already has, even being poorly positioned, right? He already has the goalkeeper to pass it back to this one here or that one there.
Sure.
And it's just this or that, nothing more, nothing less.
Yes, the distances.
The distances. And suddenly, it's a question of, no, what are you explaining to me? I already know that, but then on the field, it's not done.
Right.
And so when the coach trains and you say, you're out of position.
Yes.
I know, but you're out of position, damn it. You could only pass it to this guy.
Yes, yes. There's the importance of having it explained to you and having it...
Exactly. You say, well, and on top of that, if instead of being here, I'm a bit over there, I can play to the goalkeeper, to that one, to the other one, and to your teammate. You get me?
Yeah.
A series of things that are simple.
Yes.
The thing is, what Charlie is explaining, I was trained with this. In the end, they have to explain it to you. You have to understand it. So Charlie is talking about the concept of distance. Sometimes we talk about supporting, and everyone understands supporting as moving closer. No, sometimes supporting is moving away. The issue of passing lines to have different options for playing. So this is another concept that if you don't work on it, if they don't explain it to you,
Exactly.
you don't improve. So if you want to improve, being well positioned, having the right body shape, seeing the passing lanes, knowing the distance to facilitate the game, it's a basic concept. And this, which is what he says, one might say, wow, but this is a key concept that usually isn't explained to you. And it's very important to work on it. And we always work on it a lot with all the work that we'll talk about, the topic of small-sided games, positional play, which is of extraordinary richness and improvement.
I was also talking to a father the other day who told me his son is on a team and the coach always tells him, scan, scan, scan. And you see the kid looking, but he says they tell him to scan, but he doesn't know what he's scanning or what he's looking for.
Of course.
So what is it that they should be looking for?
Must explain first?
They have to explain it.
Look, I'll tell you one thing. The very best coaches should be coaching the kids. Because once you're, how should I put it, something simple, right? Let's take an example. I'm looking at the keeper, the whole play, looking at the keeper, right? And they pass it to me. Almost everyone takes 1, 2, 3, 4 touches, and they turn 3/4 of the way to face up the field. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. If you do that, you let it run, you're facing forward, you barely even take a touch. It's much faster. You get me? Yeah. So if in youth football, a kid gets the ball and goes tap, 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 just to turn around, you say, kid, stop, wait, zip, and that's it. But it's better to teach a kid because it sticks rather than a guy who's been turning like that for 15 years, and now you try to tell him to go the other way, You might say, damn, but we're talking, well, yes and no, and you say that, for example, those concepts, the U14 and U19 teams at Barcelona, almost all of them have it.
Sure. They've learned the concepts, just like Charlie and I have discussed many times. Playing the third man, playing vertically, basic for breaking lines, for playing, which instead of, well, we've said it 50,000 times, the importance of breaking lines and playing the third man facing forward to have verticality in the game.
Totally.
He's been explaining this to us forever, with him, with Cruyff and everyone.
For instance, many one of the things people said before in football was, wow, what a well-executed 1-2 that was. Bam, bam. Nowadays, if a guy gets past you with a 1-2, you're just out of it. You're a fool. You get me? Because he goes boom and the other guy just puts his chest out and stops him in his tracks. So one example is saying, hey, you, when I pass the ball to you, pass it to whoever you want except this guy. Don't give it back to him. You get me? Then there's always the exception where you give it back and he scores. You know what I mean? But in midfield, you say, well, I'll pass it to him. No. I mean, why? Because when I pass it to you, right, I, as your marker, go like this. I look here and I only look at this. And the other guy comes from the other side and you to the third, to the other guy, and everyone is just watching the ball. You get me? Generally, yeah? So all those things that are just little details, but they're fundamental.
Sure, because if they don't explain them to you, as we said, if they don't explain them, you don't know what you're looking for.
Exactly. They improve a lot, especially during kids' development, which is essential.
Absolutely. Charlie, now let's talk a bit about Messi, the whole napkin situation. A moment that changed history, right? What did you see in Messi when he arrived? Let's start from the very beginning.
Well, I was in Argentina, and a friend of mine tells me there's a guy here who plays really well and so on and so forth. And I was watching the South American Championship in Argentina, and I say, no, I can't. I'm going to see him, but where is he? And he tells me in Rosario, I don't know where he was. And 1,000 kilometers from where I was. And I ask him, well, and how old is that kid? And he tells me 12. I say, damn, but I'm here watching kids 18 and up to see if we sign someone and so on and so forth, the era of Riquelme and all those people. And then I told him, well, you know what? Since I trusted what this guy had told me, I say, well, but look, when I go to Barcelona, we'll send an invitation for the boy to come because he's 12 now. Let him come with his father and his mother. And then, well, Christmas comes around Easter. The father, the mother, the boy come and he stays here. But when they arrive here, and I wanted to stay to see him, I have to go to Australia because of the Olympics and so on and so forth, which I didn't want to go to because after all, there was little football there, right? But the club, man, you have to go because there's a representation there, whatever. Anyway, when I left to the 7 or 8 youth football coaches there, I say, well, watch this kid every day and tell me what's what. When I get back, we'll decide. But of course, I say, he has to be very good. I say, because if he's not very good, he can't be signed because he's a foreigner, he's 12, many things can happen. Well, anyway, and I left. And after 15 days, I returned. And I asked some of the people who were there, the 7 or 8 man, this kid, if he were from here in Barcelona, which is nearby, to see how he evolves. Yes. The other one, well, from Hospitalet too. I say, no, that kid plays very well, but futsal. The other one told me foosball, you know. And well, I didn't know what anymore when I was left like that. And I said, well, you know what? I'll set up a match. A bit of a trap because I looked for kids older than him, a year older. And in the afternoon at 5 o'clock, I'll come here to the mini study and we'll have the match. And I'll be there. And I've always explained it. I say, I arrive right at 5 and at 1 minute to 5 I get there. But of course I was coming in through the corner and the referee goes beep and blows the whistle. And I start walking all along the sideline, behind the goal and to the other side to sit on the bench. And when I get to the other side of the bench, I say, hey, you can sign this one now. He's the best of them all, by far.
5 minutes was enough for you?
Man, hey, a spectacle. But people tell me, and it's what I sometimes have to think, that this guy is gifted. No. If a guy, I always say, you know, when you take people who really do not have any idea or any sort of clue about football at all, and you say, look, there are 22 guys here, let's see who's the best. They tell you this one, because he's something else. You know, there are players that, to see if they're good or not, you have to understand football. So a guy you'd say, well, he positions himself well, passes well, he's always in the right spot, reads the game, interprets football, but that's for the experts. But with Messi, you don't need to know football to see he's the best, because he does things constantly, and unlike anyone else. And so, damn, I said about that kid, well, either he breaks both legs or he goes crazy, but otherwise he has to be it, you know? And when he gets a bit stronger, because he was a tiny thing, besides being small, he was small, but if you see the footage footage from when he was young that we should have filmed, and now it would be normal. Yes, yes, and you were at that match. Yes, yes.
I remember it perfectly. We were there. At that time, I was coaching. I was the youth team coach, the under-19s. And I remember we'd been called for this match, for the trial match, right? And I remember, right? The match starts, and of course, like Charlie was the sporting director. He was the one who made the decision, yes or no, and the match starts and he's not there. Then he comes up and we see him, and he arrives with total calm, walking along, looking around, just walking, and nothing. And he gets to the dressing room where we all were, and I think Joaquin Cruyff was there, who was the head of youth football at the time. And well, Charlie, what do we do? What do we do? Sign him now. Right, but the thing is, sign him. Yes, but we have to, well, have him come, but we have to, well, do it. But sign him now because he's much better than everyone. So I'll remember it all my life, because you'd watch the match and like Charlie says, well, you don't have to be a genius. Yes, you saw him there. Anyone who saw him, no, he's the best. So sign him now. No, it's just, and then it's true that we later brought him in. And football goes on, and today everyone talks big, but there were people saying he's too small, this and that. There were doubts, right? There were doubts. So I remember.
That's why it was so hard for me, because when I said, sign him, I was done. I go to the club. Hey, you, this kid's coming here. Here's what we discussed. Bang. And of course, the kid and the father go there with the boy. They go there. No one's here today. Come back tomorrow. The next day, in a big club, it happens a lot. Oh, no, well, no one's come. He hasn't come here. And in the end, the father gets annoyed with every right in the world and tells me, Charlie, no one's going to mess with me. I'm leaving here. And that's when I say, hey, don't get nervous. I'm telling you we'll sign him, and we'll sign him, because I'm the one who decided here. And then when we were at Pompeia, I say to the waiter, let me have a piece of paper and a pencil. And the guy had the pencil, but he didn't have paper. And I was saying, you've got paper here, don't kid me. And the guy says, no, I only have a napkin, because it was just a crappy napkin. And that's when I write that down. I, technical director of Football Club Barcelona, commit to signing Lionel Messi as long as we agree on everything. And I sign it, and I tell the father, look, this might or probably won't be worth anything, because it's a contract I'm making like this, which might have some value. But you can always say, look, Rexach, whom I went to see, told me he'd sign him, and in the end he hasn't signed him. And that guy is the best goal scorer in the world. What a blunder. For my own sake, don't worry, I will sign him. And then he was more at ease. He was signed, and that's it. But in those things, always, the problem is if you expect unanimity, it doesn't work. Because what for you is white, for the other is gray, sure. And for the other, it's black, And then it just doesn't work.
Well, but then he joins. I think he goes to the under-16 B team, if I remember correctly. And at first he didn't play.
Well, the thing is, there was another problem.
Didn't play him.
You see, people knew. People had another problem. That kid couldn't play. He couldn't play in official matches.
Well,
he could only play in friendly matches.
Due to a legal issue?
Because of a legal issue back then, until his father could work here or whatever. So what happens? The youth B team is playing a friendly match today, so please make sure to send Messi. Likewise, the under-14 A team also has a friendly match today, so please send Messi as well. And Messi practically didn't even have a team, right? He'd go one day with one day with another, right? And he'd always tear it up.
Yes, but...
with another.
But Charlie, remember, they didn't play him.
Yes.
Then Charlie also signs the coach Tito Villanova, who is also known as Tito.
Yes, absolutely.
He signs Tito Villanova for the under-16 B team. When Tito arrives, I remember Charlie telling us, damn, I have a kid here who's incredible. And with Tito, he started playing, Messi did. And then when he started playing, everyone saw, but it's what Charlie said. Since he couldn't play, or when he finally could, when there was a team that had a match where they were struggling, send Leo. Leo would go and score a couple of goals and fix a spectacle, something extraordinary. Well, this is historic. In the end, he managed to sign him. It's football history or the napkin story.
Yes.
But that's how it is. It's the reality.
Okay, Charlie. So now let's try to understand a little bit more about what you look for. As a scout or as a talent spotter, what is it that you look for in a young player?
Well, first of all, I would say that technically speaking, he's actually a really good player, right? Because, technique is extremely important in this game. And that's something he definitely has, because when you have the ball, you make a play. Afterwards, you have to have enough technique to shoot where you want to, right? Of course, if you get there, get past the guys. And then when you have the clear pass, technically, correct, it doesn't have to be because that has to be, let's say, like a forward who is very skillful, right? But basically, Understanding the game, I mean really having a clear vision of the play.
Let me think.
Because you say, I'm a forward now. I've been a forward all my life, and they put me as a fullback. And I admit that I don't have the skills to play as a fullback. But if they put me as a fullback, I have to, and then a guy will come and dribble past me because I don't know, or I'm not fast enough, or I don't tackle hard enough, or whatever. But I have to be well positioned. I have to be in that moment, in that position. I have to place myself because maybe I've ended up there, right? So, for example, vision of the play is important. And having vision of the play, of course, if you play further forward, it's more complicated. Because when you have the chance to play as a defender, you often find yourself saying, I have the entire team right there in front of me, and I can really see everything that is happening. But of course, as you move further forward, they can attack you from all sides. They take it from you here, they take it from you there. A guy passes you here, there. So you have to have eyes in the back of your head. And up front, the further up the field you play, the harder it gets. The less time you have.
Of course.
So you have to execute fast. You have to be much faster, shoot. And sometimes you don't have time to stop and shoot. You have to shoot first time, many things. So that's the basics, right? And then look, for example, I signed Chapi Ferrer, who played right back for Barça. In the town where he played as a center forward. I signed him. I brought him to the youth team. I coached the youth team. Boom, 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 boom. And he ended up as a fullback. Why?
You put him as a fullback? Oh, I see.
Why? First, I put him in midfield, and when the opposing team had their best player, I'd put him there because he was fast and a real pest. Then as a fullback because he was very fast. And the concept was that we played with 3 defenders, but that's what I mean about having a bit of vision. Since we played so high up the pitch, we looked for speed to cover the space behind us. You know what I mean? I mean, for example, we had Coleman, who was a very good player, but basically slow, with a great pass and all that. But of course, when there was a long ball, we didn't want Coleman running back, so those two would go, they were like bullets.
The fullbacks.
Who closed down. So each one, in the end, is about making the most of the player's skills, right? You say this one, for example, Jordi Alba at Barca, he played as a left winger.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Left winger. Sergi Barjuan, he played as a left winger. And little by little, further back, further back, further back.
The move from winger to fullback is common, but from fullback to winger, it's not.
No. You see? Because I tell you again, from the back, you have plenty of time. You can take the ball, you can launch it. Up front, many times the winger is standing still.
Sure.
From a standstill, starting and dribbling past someone is much harder.
That's it.
If he's already at full speed, it's a different story. So I'm telling you that I look generally also, well, there's a guy who catches your eye. Hey, I've seen a very good guy, and we need to look at him more because that guy would suit us. But basically saying, hey, Barca is missing. Another one, he played as a center forward, Puyol. Puyol back in La Pobla, where he played as a center forward. And since he was strong and boom and great in the air, and he was brave.
And here at the start in midfield.
And then midfield. And in the end, he finished as a fullback and a center back. I'm telling you that in the end, you have to keep watching players. And he himself has to realize, it's just that I want to play as a center forward. Hey, Messi is there, so you can't play as a center forward, you know? Or Maradona is there, or Cruyff is there, or whoever. So I'm telling you that you have to adapt. And then you say, this one can play because he has the physique, because he's fast, because he has the temperament. You understand? So the problem is this. And sometimes one catches your eye. You say, man, I've seen a guy, I hadn't seen anything like Messi. But often you look for what's missing in the team.
Right.
They tell you, hey, well, Barca they're missing a right back, or they're missing, and Barca lately, well, they signed Alves, for example, remember when he was at Seville? And generally, Barca for defenders has always drawn from its youth academy. But every now and then, when they haven't had that guy, because when I played, well, Rife played, Eladio played, they were all from here. And now, for example, they've played for a long time with everyone from here. But there comes a point where you say, well, we're missing a guy. So Alves was signed.
Sure.
You know what I mean? But it's about looking for the piece you're missing. Because in the end, you can't sign them all, right?
And we also see, well, Balde, who was a winger, and they moved him back.
Also.
Fullback.
And when we signed him, he played almost as a winger. But then as a dribbler or whatever, he wasn't quite. But on the other hand, he's very powerful. And as a fullback, he's a great fullback.
And when he arrives, now, for example, people say, hey, well, he gets to the wing and he gets there and makes a goal-scoring play like a winger. Yes, but by arriving. One thing is arriving, and the other is being there.
Right?
And when you're there, you're already there. Because the field ends here. Over there almost two. And then you already have one or two guys waiting for you. It's a different story, and you're no longer coming at full speed. I mean, you're not coming, you come, hop, and then something else comes into play. So notice that those guys can help a lot. The winger, because sometimes the winger, the one who knows he's a winger, is trying to get out of a situation, and they overlap him from behind, and then they go into the open space. And since they've been wingers, well, they do the job. But one thing is, I'm telling you, arriving, and the other thing is being
there. Right. The fullbacks and, well, the backlines, when they attack that space, do more damage because, as you say, being there like a winger who, well, has to be skillful.
Now it's what we were saying, going back to the concept we talked about with Xavi of distance. Of course, if it's one-on-one and the fullback does it wrong and gets close, he brings an opponent closer. In the end, you turn a one-on-one into a two-on-two, which is more complicated. This is the situation that sometimes, that's why you have to do it with the right timing and at the right moment.
That's it. Correct timing is key too. Everything has its timing. It's
no. And then you know what? Look, football, I'm going to tell you something silly, right? But the goalkeeper throws the ball, the fullback opens up, they play it, practically the fullback. You're right on the line. So the winger is also on the line, but further forward. So making a side pass along the line, on the line to the winger is almost impossible. Because if it's off by an inch, you're out. So it's practically a pass where you say, is it forbidden? It's not forbidden, if you know what I mean. But
almost.
You get me?
Because first the winger receives it with the guy right on him.
Yeah.
Poorly oriented because of what we said, you can't see anything. So this pass.
So you could say, I go to the fullback, since he's unmarked, he moves up. The one up top, you see it in every team nowadays, he comes closer.
Mm-hmm.
So by moving in closer, he actually draws the defender in with him to the plate, which creates a new dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
If they get too close, one guy marks them both, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
So what do you have to do? Basically, it's forbidden, you see, to play here, and the one from here there.
Mm-hmm.
Then automatically the winger is side on, and the pass reaches him, you see?
So, Charlie, you mean that first you have to play inside to then open up? Because that way the winger's body position is the right one.
The winger gets into position without even realizing it, right? Different like this. He's got the guy right on his tail, and when the pass goes out there, the guy turns like this, and he's automatically well positioned. Sure. Well, that one, as I said, look, I didn't invent football. It's details that the player, sometimes it just comes naturally to someone, sometimes, but I say this play from fullback to fullback on the line to pass to the winger, it's almost impossible, right? Okay. So you have to play to the middle. That guy also pulls away a bit. This one does this, and then you play facing that way. That's how it is. Like they're little things. But no. This is extremely important. Once again, we're back to the concept of being well-oriented, of body positioning, which will help you a lot. If you put a fullback there, right on the touchline, and you say, pass it to that guy down the line, it won't go straight down the line, or it'll drift a bit and it'll be out. But, Charlie, they have to explain it to you. Exactly. They have to explain it to you, you have to see it, and they have to show you totally. And now you've also mentioned, well, cases like Puyol, who started as a forward, then midfield, then centre-back, or Balde, fullback to winger. So how important is it in development for a player to try out different positions? Or should a player stay in one position and perfect that role, or keep trying different ones and stay open? No, I think when you reach a certain level, like a top team like Barca, which is that good, you can see it, and you say, this player could be a great midfielder, or he has the skills for whatever else. Because those players, so you understand me, if they play in their hometown, they're the best. As goalkeepers, they're also the best. You put him wherever you want, he's the best in town. But of course, then they come here, and they're all hand-picked guys. At Barcelona, they're all hand-picked. From wherever, but they're hand-picked. And of course, then everyone is at a very high level. And then you say, hey, that kid, with the ones he's playing with, he'll never play here. And yet, because of the physique he has, and the speed he has and the attitude he has on the pitch, that guy can do a job here. You know what I mean? And that's when the coach calls someone over and they say, no, it's just that I don't want to play here. And you have to convince him and say, oh, hey, listen, what is your best quality? This and this and this and this. Then making him understand, look, I want to play. Hey, you're not a skillful player. You getting forward, you can do a lot of damage. You know, sprinting, you run faster than the others, you get there, you cross it, and we score a goal. But if you have a guy in front of you, you can't dribble past him. You might do it once, but it's not your thing. And if not, let's try it to see how many times. I mean, it's a matter of looking where the guy can perform best. Sure. And so the coach has to understand a little bit, you know what I mean? And that's fundamental. And there are many wingers who have ended up playing as fullbacks. Why? Because they have more time, because they're fast, because they play well, because they get there, they cause damage. But it's not, I repeat, it's not about being there, it's about getting there. And if, for example, the fullback, the winger, moves towards the center, well, there's a corridor where you can reach the goal. But of course, it's a matter of speed and more physical than anything else. I say that's where the quality of the coach comes in. And there are coaches who, look, an example, at a professional level, Barca had Dembele, and here he played, but not. And one day he played a match, I don't know if it was in Malaga, and he played as a right midfielder. And being at Barca and all, I saw him play. And I told my son, who loves football, he also plays well and all that. I said, let's see, if I were the coach, I would put Dembele as a center forward. Why is that? Because he can go one way or the other, he doesn't care. And he has a right and a left foot, yes. And he's fast. Listen, Luis Enrique has put him as a center forward. He has. Ballon d'Or. And I told my son this, you know, I said that I would honestly put Dembele as a center forward when they were at Barca. Still, yes. Your son will have to come and confirm it. But I saw him one day playing as a midfielder in Malaga, and I said, damn, that guy, at first, you know? One match, yes, can you just imagine? Damn, see what he does. And how and all that, and it's like that. Listen, so there are always ideas that sometimes fail, and you say, okay, back to your position. But it doesn't hurt to try. Of course. The thing about trying, it's happened sometimes that you either sign a player or put them in a position or whatever, and it hasn't worked out. Many. At Barcelona, well, not working out because they've all played in the first division, and some have been internationals. Look, let me explain. Sergi Barjuan, he played from the youth team, he went to the amateurs, which was the team of nobodies. And Cruyff was there, and then I was there. And then Cruyff says, no, this amateur team has to go because the players are good, but not enough to reach the first team. Yes. And he tells me, you know, we have to clean house. We're looking for players for other teams. And I tell him, well, 3 players will stay. One named Luis Carreras, who later played in the thing. Sergi Barjuan and another who later retired and all that. And Sergi Barjuan, we put him as a winger. A day goes by, something is missing. In midfield, he runs too much. Now you say he runs too much. It sounds like, no, he runs too much. We put him at fullback. We put him in Barca B. And they conceded 3 or 4 goals because the guy didn't close down. You know, he stayed wide because Cruyff and we put him in the European Cup against Galatasaray. We won there. He stayed in the first team and has been capped 50 times. Let's see if it wasn't a surprise, but it was a surprise of we already knew what he could give, but the success, the great career he's had since, maybe even he didn't expect it. You get me?
Sure.
This is to tell you there's always a surprise, and the guy you say to yourself, look at that, we've found the right spot for that guy, you know?
Football has twists and turns.
Exactly, man.
And going back to Messi, did you imagine back then that Messi would be what he is?
I'll tell you one thing now. The results he's achieved, the years he's lasted, what he's accomplished, you know what I mean? It's like now they tell me, this kid coming up now, do you think he'll surpass Messi? I say, hey, this kid just started and Messi has scored almost 1,000 goals. It's another story, it's another concept. But I was convinced that if nothing happened to him, if it wasn't a major injury, the guy had to become one of the great players for Barca. Now, on top of that, I think he's even exceeded expectations because I think he's a guy, in my opinion, who lives, thinks, sleeps football, football, football. I mean, if you have other interests, sometimes you get a bit distracted. But I've always seen Messi there, football, 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 and football, and football. And I mean, so with that mentality, it's very hard. There are many players who reach the very top, and you say, damn, Ronaldinho, he didn't last long.
Neymar, as you know, not long.
Maradona, not long. But not long means not long, eh? Not just doing 4 or 5 years and saying, damn, that guy's a phenomenon. You understand? Sure. And this guy has been at it for 20 years and is still playing. You have to have the other part, right? And Messi has this other part. But many people
don't know. That's why now everyone, you've mentioned him, right? They ask me, when I signed Lamine, when we brought him in here, people say to you, well, but they inevitably compare him to Leo, right? I say, well, we'll see. It'll depend on him. I think what makes Leo's difference so extraordinary is the durability. Like you say, he's been at it for 20 years with the mentality of bang, bang, bang. So Lamine, who is a phenomenon, and today I think is the best player, it will depend on him, the desire, the intensity, and the hunger to want to win. But he has everything, obviously.
No. And now also notice that there's a bit of the... If you take the wingers from Paris Saint-Germain, for example, and then consider the wingers from Bayern Munich as well, and if you also think about the wingers from other top European clubs, there are quite a few of them, actually. All of them similar. That goal with a bit of a curve like that, you know what I mean? What I'm saying is people watch, and those at that level say, hey, if he can do that, I can do it too. You know? I mean, and now there are several teams, let's say, that have, for example, wingers, because for a long time there were practically no wingers who really did the job, right? And now there are 6 or 7 wingers in Europe.
Yeah.
Right? Bayern Munich has 2.
Oof, they're great, huh? Olise and
Diaz.
Great.
Fantastic.
And Paris Saint-Germain, same thing.
Them too.
Fantastic.
Right? You know? And Arsenal as well, too.
Yeah, they do too.
Yes.
I mean, I'm talking about, and Madrid as well, you see? What I mean is that now, because of the way the game is played, because now there's also it's all about tactics, strategy. Now the winger, if you notice, when the ball goes down the left side of the field, for example, you can really see how their positioning and movement have become so important. If the right winger stays wide, the defender tucks in tight. Tucks in tight, meaning almost to the corner of the box or even further in. And if there's a switch, and this is about ball speed, not slow, boom, the winger can take on the defender very easily, something that didn't happen before. Before, fullbacks would mark the winger tight, they were right on top.
Oh, there, man.
Even if they went off the pitch, if you know what I mean, and the midfielders would tuck in.
Right.
So there was one center back and the other, and those who closed up the middle were the midfielders. And so they did a bit of that. And on top of that, before, there was still a sweeper. You know? I mean, football is always changing and people look for new solutions.
Sure.
And then when you look at the skills of people who used to find it really hard to stand out, well, now, it's just like I said before. Honestly, I haven't seen 5 or 6 wingers of this level with this kind of talent in such a long time.
That's true. What separates a good player from an extraordinary one?
Well, I think the extraordinary one, the truly remarkable individual, is that guy who, first of all, as I always say, is absolutely complete in every possible way. I mean, you know, when you look at it, you say, there's a guy who, just to give you a better idea, you can actually say, there's a football player you'd rate. Let's break it down. Shooting, right foot, maybe a 6, left foot, perhaps a 4, heading ability, maybe a 3. Speed, let's say, a 4, and everything else, honestly, is pretty low. So, when you consider all those aspects, you really see what I mean. Then you say vision, a 10. And that guy is useful for one thing, because he might not score, he might not have anything else, but he has a vision that you put him in the middle and the guy moves the ball like it's nothing, one-touch play, but it's for those who understand football. They say, this guy, what vision he has. But to appreciate that player, you have to be a football professional and understand the game. To watch Messi, you don't need to understand football. You see him and you say, damn, he's for me, you know. So that's a bit of the big difference, let's say, between types of players. Players you'd call, well, a great player, the guy who is very complete, he's fast, he's skillful, he shoots, he scores goals. He's not great at hitting, but then the guy is an 8 at this, an 8 at that, a 9 at this, and a 10 at the other. But then there's the guy you say, damn, he's at the bare minimum. But then he has a vision that, well, look, he makes the team play.
Busquets, for example, one of the best midfielders in the history of football.
Yes, but look, you have, for example, you take Busquets, you take Milla, you take Guardiola, and you also take the one they actually have now at Paris Saint-Germain.
Vitinha, right? You know, Vitinha.
Vitinha. Or before there was that Verratti, the Italian guy, say, you know, they're guys that you say, well, do they score many goals? No. Are they very fast? No. Are they good with their head? No. Do they dribble very well? No, you see? But damn, they have one thing the others don't, a vision. So I see you always have to know, but those players are more for the connoisseurs.
Sure. The one who understands football.
Someone who sees football differently.
Well, Busquets, and it worked out.
Exactly. In the end, the best midfielder in the world.
Of course. Yes, that's the beauty of it. Knowing how to understand football and understanding that this player can fit into a certain situation. And that's the beauty of it, that not everyone sees it.
No, exactly.
And now, Charlie, what does Barcelona mean to you?
Man, Barcelona for me it's been my life. Well, it is my life. And also my second home. I've spent as many hours at home as I have at Barca. Or almost more, you know? No, because I was at the field all day long. And hours, and in this very hotel, training camps and more training camps, well, my whole life.
Yes.
It's just incredible. I mean, since practically 15 years old, because at 12 you don't travel much, but by 15 you're already traveling here, there, and everywhere. So from 15 until, well, let's say from the year 62, 63 until 81, always traveling every single weekend. And then as a coach, 10, 12 more years. And then as a scout, well, now 15 days in Argentina, now 15 days in Chile, now 15 days over in Africa. I mean, now you're spinning around more than a fan.
And what was the proudest moment of your career?
Man, I've had many moments that I've enjoyed a lot. I always say, people ask me always, when did you enjoy it the most? I always say while playing. I mean, when it's a pleasure because it's you, when you score a goal, you're the one scoring it.
Sure.
And you say, that goal I scored. Now, when the four of us veterans get together, do you remember that goal? Telling old war stories means a lot.
That's priceless.
Yes, it's priceless. I mean, I say that in general, my life until today, and I hope until life ends, as I say, has been very happy. Because it's worked out. I mean, I could say a bit exaggeratedly that I've spent my life playing. Because for me, football, besides being a sport and a whatever, now when I sometimes hear people say, no, it's that we're working hard. This thing about working hard, I can say we're training hard, but football is a game.
It's a game.
I've never said I'm going to work at football. I say I'm going to play football. You understand? For me, football has been a game. And it's a really enjoyable thing to play football.
It's the most important thing. What we always say, that above all, you have to have fun.
Have fun there.
Many children listen to our audience, and the most important thing is that, above all, having fun, not having this pressure, is what really matters. So you have to take it seriously, obviously. To be a footballer is an incredible discipline.
But for example, what happens to me sometimes with children, and this, let's see, I go with my grandson and that, they go to play a match and they lose. And you see one who starts to cry. And I say to him, but why are you crying? Hey, if you want to play football, the matches you'll lose. I mean, if you take it like that, you better do something else. Because in the end, and there are matches, generally, look, I always say one thing, if every match you go to, which I've lived through, don't think it's a joke, the typical guy who goes to the field and people will say, no, this isn't true, I'm telling you, you go to the field and he says to you, you see someone next to you who says, damn, now I'd like the match to be over. We'd have won 1-0 on a penalty in the last minute and at home having a beer. When I heard that one, I say to myself, for goodness sake, and now that I'm going to the field, that I don't know what will happen. It was a pleasure you couldn't give yourself. So if you don't go with that mentality, and maybe one day you're annoyed and you'd go out, they'd give you a whistling that would leave you stiff. But next Sunday again, you understand? And the next, if you do things while suffering, do something else.
Charlie, and the most difficult moment of your career?
Look, I'm going to tell you everything lived. Apart from my private life, which has also gone well for me, my whole life has always revolved around football. So I'm going to tell you in another way. The happiest day of my life was the day they called me. I play for Barca, I debut, I score a goal. That day they didn't even give me. I didn't fit, and that was the ultimate for me. Afterwards, there have been many successes and many goals, and I've enjoyed it. But the saddest day of my life, the day I had to retire. That I had a spectacular tribute against the Argentine national team at the time I was retiring, and Maradona was arriving, and then I'm already living with Menotti and company, whatever. But it's just that at that very moment, I remember so clearly how I went out onto the field to play, gave it my all, and then after the game, I went to the locker room and I was showering. It was then that it really crossed my mind. My whole life, all those years, fighting and working so hard for this very moment. Then it's over. Today's the last day. And you say, you know that thing you say? Everything there was to achieve, but now it's all over. And you're 35 years old, and you think you're not exactly an old man, right? I was on the verge of going, just to keep the itch at bay afterwards, to New York, where Cruyff and company were at the Cosmos. But then Cruyff called me and said, don't come, because football here is fading away. Pelé was there, Beckenbauer was there, they were all there, or some Italians. I said, well, let's do one more year there to satisfy the urge. But then that whole thing fell apart, and I didn't go. But then there's that moment where you say, well, now what? And I remember waking up the next morning. Of course, I had my life scheduled here, there, everywhere. It was already planned for me. On January 1st, I knew where I'd be on December 30th. And then I said, no, now what? People would say to me, let's go play tennis one day. And I'd say, sure, let's go tomorrow. No, I have to work. Of course, people worked. And it was complicated. I mean, that first phase, let's say, of retiring, what happened is that I quickly got involved with the youth teams. And then, since I was already playing, because as I say, no, I've never been one of those coaches who says, you go here, you go there. I would get into the game, And I played in the game. I played with them.
It's just, no.
Well, right?
No, it's just a spectacle, of course.
Yes.
So when he coached us, he had just retired. A spectacle. But even when he starts coaching the first team, the first year Cruyff arrived, the first year you guys played.
Yes, always, yes.
The skinny one, Cruyff played. And I remember I was a kid and I was there thinking, and I said, damn, but these are the best there are. I mean, it was spectacular. They were, my goodness, they're fantastic experiences.
It was a good time.
How nice. And now, to conclude this episode, so I've loved this episode. If you had a young player who dreams of being a professional and you could give him one piece of advice, what would you tell him?
First, basically that they don't get discouraged. Because here at Barca, it happens a lot. They arrive at Barca. An example, 15 kids aged 12. The following year, they all move up. But for the next one going to the youth team, 5 or 6 don't make the cut, as I say, right? Boom, to the youth team, another cut. And in the end, 3 or 4 remain. And maybe to the first team, 1 or 2 make it. And the others have to go play elsewhere, right? Either Zaragoza or Valencia or Betis, whatever. But those have already done it. The period turned out well for them. But there are people who get very discouraged, They get like a slump, but a major one. It's very hard for them to get over it, right? And I think the most important thing is to never get discouraged. Nor should you be one of those dreamers who says, I don't touch it and I'm going to play for Barca's first team or I'm going to the national team. But I'm telling you that football has many twists and turns. And there are people who've been told you're good for nothing, and after 4 days, they're an international player. And this is the reality.
Not giving up because...
Not giving up.
The mental aspect is, again, the mindset is basic, right?
Well, Charlie, thank you very much.
Sure.
It was a real pleasure having you here. We'd love to have you back sometime.
Well, don't worry.
Thanks so much for taking the time to share all of this with us today.
Okay. Well, whenever you want, you know that.
See you in the next one.
All right, thank you.
Hey, thanks for being here. If you want to keep spending time with us, subscribe to the channel, and if there's any topic you would like us to cover, leave it in the comments below, and we'll see you in the next episode.